Well, good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I want to recognize that this conference would not be possible without the support from our sponsors. So let's take a moment to thank them for their continued support. I want to specifically thank our program sponsor, The Ohio State University, for their generosity and support, not just for this event, but their partnership and collaboration on sustainability initiatives year-round. And I also want to thank our network sponsors, Ohio University, NOPAC, and SWACO, as well as all our other sponsors and exhibitors who are helping to make this event successful. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. And with that, I will get us started. And to kick off the summit, we will now recognize outstanding leaders with our Regional Sustainability Awards. Please join me in welcoming our Chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, Mayor Ben Kessler with the City of Bexley, our Vice Chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, Mayor Lori Jadwin with the City of Gahanna, and MORPC's own Sustainability Officer, Brandy Whetstone.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good morning, I'm Ben Kessler, Mayor with the City of Bexley and Chair of MORPC's Sustainability Advisory Committee. What's up, Bexley? I am pleased to present the Leadership in Sustainability Award. This award recognizes an individual or an entity that exemplifies outstanding leadership and innovation in seeking comprehensive sustainability solutions to address key challenges facing the region. It is our great honor to announce the recipient of this year's Leadership in Sustainability Award, Ty Marsh, former Executive Director of SWACO. Ty, please join us on stage.
When I think of Ty Marsh, I think of a leader who's focused on impact. Ty is somebody who's advised mayors, community leaders, business leaders, sustainability leaders. He's always pushing us to do better.
Ty Marsh is a genuine individual who has always led with a steady hand and was able to improve SWACO's public image by forming a number of partnerships.
Ty's work at SWACO has been so important. He helped get it focused on the future. He took it beyond materials management, looking at all aspects of sustainability.
Ty just always wants to help people. He's always a mentor.
He was driven by doing what was in the best for the public interest.
He had the vision of the old landfill, the former Phoenix golf course. He had a vision there that could be used for the benefit of our community, and a solar park will end up there.
All of these things contribute to our community being more sustainable and really being about the future.
I just think Ty's a great person, and I wouldn't bet him on the golf course. He's a better golfer than people think.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lori Jadwin, Mayor of the City of Gahanna and Vice Chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee and sidekick to Mayor Ben Kessler. Thank you. After the shout out yesterday, I had to pay that back. I am honored today to present the Collaborative Achievement in Sustainability Award, which recognizes a group of entities or individuals who have shown effectiveness in producing environmental accomplishments through a collaborative effort with tangible results, innovation, and long-term impacts on Central Ohio. We are excited to announce that the award this year goes to Buckeye Lake for Tomorrow. So would the members of the Buckeye Lake Region Corporation please join us on stage?
Formed from the northward retreat of the glaciers more than 1,100 years ago, Buckeye Lake has been dammed and reshaped over hundreds of years. First developed as a reservoir for the Ohio and Erie Canal, today it features a diversity of wildlife and recreational activities. More than a decade ago, the Buckeye Lake Area Civic Association embarked on the mission to improve the watershed that makes up the Buckeye Lake region. The result? Buckeye Lake for Tomorrow was launched in partnership with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts of Fairfield, Licking, and Perry counties, and the Divisions of Park and Wildlife for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Over the years, agricultural, commercial, residential, and recreational stakeholders came together, guiding development and watershed policies in a thoughtful, lake-sustaining manner. This creative collaboration focused on monitoring water quality in the lake and streams, identifying the origins of pollutants and sediment, and coordinating improvement projects to the Buckeye Lake watershed. MORPC is proud to honor Buckeye Lake for Tomorrow with the 2022 Collaborative Achievement Award, celebrating their efforts to provide a more sustainable future for Buckeye Lake.
Good morning, everyone, and congratulations to everyone again for your wonderful achievements. I'm Brandy Whetstone. I'm the Sustainability Officer with MORPC. It's with great pleasure that I have the honor of presenting the Leadership in Mobility Award. It's given annually in memory of William A. Bill Lewis, Jr., former Chief Mobility Engineer at the City of Columbus. The Leadership in Mobility Award recognizes an individual who exemplifies outstanding work toward creating a world-class multimodal transportation system here in Central Ohio. So we're thrilled to announce this year's Leadership in Mobility Award goes to Birdie Fields, Black Girls Do Bike. Come on up and join us. If Birdie or any representative would like to come up and accept the award, feel free to join us, or we'll get it to you at a later point.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kate Barter, the Ohio State University Executive Director, Sustainability Institute.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see so many faces in person. It's still a little unusual, but what a great crowd to see everyone this morning. I'll just say I'm really honored to be here. The partnership with MORPC is something that Ohio State really values. We have many different cells of partnering with this great organization, and we hope to, and we're growing them more and more into the future. As the co-director of our Sustainability Institute at Ohio State, I really have the privilege of working on this topic across the university's ecosystem. My co-director and I lead a small but mighty team that really focuses on growing research opportunities. We have over 300 faculty members affiliated with our institute. We looked for ways to enhance the curriculum for all kinds of students, grad, undergrad, professional, and even looking more at, people who are in the workforce already, and how can Ohio State bring its resources to teach about sustainability. We have a hand in making sure Ohio State, which is a consumer of a lot of stuff, be more sustainable in our operations, and we really value the outreach and engagement part, which is core to Ohio State's mission as a land-grant university. So this is just another great example of how we can not only bring knowledge to the community, but we really believe to solve the sustainability challenges of the future, it's really going to take us all working together in academia, government, the nonprofit, and the business sector to solve the problems and really maximize the opportunities in front of us for future generations. So with that, I'm really excited to be able to announce the keynote for this morning's plenary session. Alan Waltz is with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Region 5 and serves as the director of the Tribal and Multimedia Program Office. This office serves Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin, and 35 federally recognized tribes. What I also learned about Alan is that he has done many, many different jobs within US EPA. He started in 1996 as a lawyer. We will forgive him for that. He's expanded his repertoire to working in the program side of the agency. And if I have a background of working with Ohio EPA for many, many years before I joined Ohio State. And the knowledge of both sides of a regulatory agency is really important, and people who've cross-pollinated across an agency like that really do understand it in a different way than someone who's just been a lawyer or just a program officer. And this is a really important time for US EPA. And I think what's really important is the way local government can interact with the federal government and some of the resources, which are frankly probably unprecedented in my career, to see how local government, the federal government, the state government can all work together in a new kinds of partnerships to solve some of the problems. So with that, I will invite you to welcome Alan to the stage, and thank you, Alan, for being here.
All right, thank you, Kate, for that very kind introduction. It's wonderful to be here. It's stunning and amazing to see so many human beings gathered in a room to talk about sustainability, and I think that's fantastic. I'm really happy to be here today and join your summit. And indeed, we are making historic investments in advancing environmental justice, so I'll talk about that a little bit. Let me start by giving you just a taste of the history of environmental justice at EPA. It started in the federal government in 1994, responding to a movement that was focused largely on discrimination in how hazardous wastes were being managed in our country. EPA and other agencies committed to identify and address the disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects of our actions, all of our actions, on minority and low-income populations. We also committed to promote non-discrimination in how we managed our programs, and to provide all communities with access to public information and public participation. It's a lot of words there, but it really boils down to two simple principles that I know we all carry in our hearts. One is fair treatment, and one is meaningful involvement. And if we carry those two values in our work, that's how we advance environmental justice. That's been my experience. So starting in 1996, as Kate mentioned, I started as an attorney, a staff attorney, and for another decade after that, managed our enforcement program. And that gave me a really deep appreciation of the power of a well-written, well-enforced rule to protect our environment and public health. But from the very start, I understood as well that however powerful our regulatory tools are, they do not always meet communities where they live in their lived experience. They often address only one source of pollution at a time. They may only address one form of environmental quality, and they may not necessarily take into account the context of the community in which we are operating. So part of that is struggling to account for risks and benefits are distributed, the distributional aspect, let alone thinking about aspects of community well-being and vulnerability that are beyond what we normally think of as the environment, what we call social determinants of health, are just as important to the well-being of community. So I realized very early in my career that EPA had to get better at collaborative problem solving. We had to understand how to invest in communities consistent with their own visions of their highest well-being, of their future, like some of the stories I've already heard this morning about your accomplishments. We needed to actively engage in approaches that were founded in holistic, community-based planning aimed at securing a sustainable future of thriving and resilience. And I understood that although we had some pretty impressive authorities and some pretty impressive resources, there were also a lot of gaps. And those gaps in our authority, resources, and understanding could be bridged by working together towards this common cause. Of course, you really exemplify this understanding that I came to. You work across counties, cities, villages, townships, and regional organizations to collaborate and thrive together. Your work is critical to our collective efforts to protect and restore our environment. You bring awareness to the many challenges we face. You create thought-provoking conversations in fora like this. And you innovate, and you drive measurable change. I was really impressed to see that not only do you have a sustainability agenda, you have a dashboard to prove whether or not you're making progress on it. That's the kind of action that really exemplifies leadership, and I applaud the leadership of Central Ohio in this work. It's really an honor to be a part of this. So I read the sustainable agenda, regional sustainability agenda. The 4 goals in there: improve air quality, reduce climate change impacts, protect and preserve natural resources, improve quality of life through sustainable and equitable communities, and promote sustainable growth and development. EPA's priorities align so well with those goals. We may not be doing the particular work that you can advance, but those priorities are absolutely shared, and they open so many doors for us to work together in new ways as we move forward, as Kate indicated. And I'm really actually very proud that environmental justice has taken its rightful place at the center of EPA's work. The 2 biggest challenges we face as a nation, in my mind, are the same top priorities that we've identified at EPA: environmental justice and climate change. And they're intertwined. It's the very underserved and overburdened communities are often the least prepared to rebound from extreme weather events that we're seeing as symptoms of climate change in our region. That also means we have the greatest opportunities to invest in those communities and make the greatest gains towards our collective resilience in those places. So environmental justice truly is a central factor in everything that we do, thinking about the justice of our action, whether or not it's promoting equity. It underpins all of our work, not just climate change, but safeguarding drinking water, revitalizing contaminated sites, and ensuring that everyone has clean and safe air to breathe. As our administrator, Michael Regan, puts it, every person in the United States has the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthier life, no matter how much money you have in your pockets, the color of your skin, or your zip code. This is at the heart of our work because it's our obligation to empower people who've been left out of the conversation for too long. Often the very same communities are on the front lines of pollution and are suffering disproportionately from the impacts of climate change. How do we solve this problem? We start by listening. We ask questions. We sit down. The key to environmental justice, to real meaningful involvement, is empowering communities, giving them a voice and a seat at the table. And the work you do is so important to that. Creating sustainability plans, creating development plans, all of that stuff is your work in lifting up the voices of the people you serve in ways that even EPA can hear them in Chicago. So that's a really valuable thing. It's important to invest in change, to actively address the status quo. It's a status quo in which some communities have unquestionably been left behind. In some cases, such as redlining, these differences in treatment were formally enforced by law and reinforced by decades of government policy and decisions, along with market forces. In any case, we're working to remedy this neglect. We helped to create this condition through the choices we made as a unit of federal government. That means we can be part of the change as well, and we can be part of the transformation, along with all of you. So a big part of that, so now how do we actually translate this into action, right? A big part of it is an initiative that we call Justice 40. It's a whole of government effort to ensure that federal agencies work with states and local government to deliver at least 40% of the overall benefits of all federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities that are they're identified by a mapping metric, so anybody can go and see how those communities have been identified. So the goal is that we want to repair those places, invest in those places that we have equitable environmental protection. This means everything from accelerated cleanup of Superfund sites, replacing lead pipes, investing in water and wastewater infrastructure. Just as our past decisions, again, have affected and shaped these communities, what we do going forward can transform them. Another major step that we've taken that was announced just a few weeks ago is for the first time, EPA has established a national office charged with advancing environmental justice and civil rights. Along with that, in Region 5, the commitment comes with it, and in regions across the country, this commitment comes with additional staff who will be equipped to engage communities as well as tribal, state, and local partners to address environmental justice concerns, and will manage and disperse historic levels of grants and technical assistance. This means that at long last, I will have the resources to proactively engage with groups like the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, with all of your organizations, and work with you towards change. We will have the resources to collaborate, to share data, and to bring our resources to the table to support your work as much as possible. It's going to be transformative for us in the way that we work with local government. So we've already been stepping up our engagement. We're not waiting for these new staff to come in. We've got marching orders from day one. So starting in March 2021, to really start to stretch our muscles here and find new ways of doing business, we partnered with a sister regional planning agency, the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, to launch an Environmental Justice Academy in Dayton, Ohio. Participants cultivate skills to identify environmental challenges and achieve environmental improvement goals in their communities. The Academy teaches and encourages collaborative problem solving with local government, small businesses, academic institutions, and industry to create a shared vision among different stakeholders so that all parts of the community have a voice in addressing environmental concerns. I see this as a good example of how EPA's Environmental Justice Program can make a helpful contribution in partnership with organizations like MORPC. So climate change. Climate change is not simply the challenge of our time, but the challenge of all time. Here in the Midwest, we see the symptoms in the form of a hotter, wetter, and drier environment. And we are already seeing extremes of both wet weather and drought. It's projected that we'll see more. This affects rural communities and urban centers alike. It affects tribal nations. It affects everyone. And as we see these more intense, less predictable, and highly localized rainstorms, we're seeing that the capacity of local sewer systems is overwhelmed, causing basement backups and widespread flooding in some areas, with 9 of the top 10 years for extreme one-day precipitation occurring since 1996, the year I started work at EPA. This inundation diminishes crop productivity, affects our food supply. Everyone has been affected by climate change, so we must act together to mitigate it. So that requires some investments as well, right? The bipartisan infrastructure law is a game changer in this regard. It dedicates an additional $60 billion to EPA over the next 5 years. A lot of that money is going to address environmental justice concerns, as I just discussed. $3.5 billion will go to increase cleanups at Superfund sites and allow us to add new sites to the national priority list. Cleaning up these sites and delisting them will permit economic development and healthier environments, often in the very places that have historically been neglected or degraded. The infrastructure law also allocates $1 billion over the next 5 years to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, or GLRI. This will be devoted to accelerating and expediting cleanup work at the areas of concern, the legacy contaminated sites around the Great Lakes. This will also help to revitalize local economies with more opportunities for access to clean water and green areas and the benefits those areas provide. Sort of like your Rapid 5 project, but at a Great Lakes scale. Those investments in access to environmental amenities is good for everyone. Good for everyone, right? In fact, economically, in 2018, an independent economic study found that every GLRI dollar spent to restore and benefit our Great Lakes produces an additional $3.35 of economic activity. So that's some nice leverage of change. Of course, not every Superfund site, not every site that needs to be cleaned up is a Superfund site. Brownfields are an enormous challenge. Even the potential of an area being contaminated can be quite challenged in terms of redevelopment. And areas that are contaminated but not at the level of a Superfund site also need to be remediated to support clean and effective use of that land. So since EPA's Brownfields program started in 1995, we've provided about $2.1 billion in grant funding. And this has helped to change the way communities address these contaminated properties. MORPC is, in fact, managing an EPA grant for site assessment, I think $600,000 grant, which is a critical first step in determining how to brownfields. You have to understand what you're dealing with there. There's other resources to come on that. There's a 254 million in EPA's brownfields program are being invested this year, and that's reaching 265 communities across the country. There's about 180 million of that is from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and this almost triples our ability to make a difference in brownfields compared to what we were able to fund last year. Tripling of our brownfields funding is very significant for us. The vast majority of the communities that those resources go to have proposed projects in historically underserved areas, about 86%. And you well know in the work that you do, the power of cleaning up and reinvesting in these properties to create environmental justice and economic progress at the same time. One study of 48 brownfield sites found that 2 to 7 times more than the $12.4 million EPA contributed were generated in local tax revenue 1 year after cleanup. Really powerful change. Another study found that property values of homes near revitalized brownfield sites increased between 5 and 15% following cleanup. So those investments in cleaning up brownfields and returning that land to productive use is one of the most powerful things that local government can do. To date, communities participating in the program have attracted more than $35 billion in cleanup and redevelopment funding after receiving brownfields funds. It's a great way to leverage that change. And it's also created over 183,000 jobs in the cleanup, construction, and redevelopment of those sites. So this is an area where it's very clear that environmental health and equity do not come at the expense of economic health. A healthy environment, equitable societies can contribute to a healthy economy. Another really important area of investment that I mentioned earlier is water infrastructure. So we've got now an additional $50 billion for water and wastewater infrastructure, the largest single investment in the water sector in our history. It was badly needed. I've read for years and years from societies of engineers about the needs for water infrastructure investment. So finally, we're in a position to step up and really provide the resources that are needed for that. One of the most pressing infrastructure issues we face, and one that contributes to one of the most significant environmental injustices in our country, is lead in drinking water. The impact on children is inequitable, it's unacceptable, it's reversible, and it creates a drain. It slows down our progress across all communities because, as you may know, lead not in high levels can create severe physical issues, but at even low levels it can have neurological effects that reduce IQ points and hold children back. So it's really important to address that area from an environmental justice perspective. So we estimate that about 6 to 10 million homes in the country have lead service lines. And by targeting funding through Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, we can help communities address those while creating the jobs that are involved in replacing those lines. We also need to invest in drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater system upgrades to prevent those sewer overflows I was talking about earlier and to make sure everyone has clean drinking water in rural communities, tribal communities, and urban communities. And we also have to be thinking about emerging contaminants like PFAS. The drinking water regulation is always shifting as we understand more about pollutants. So let me talk also then, I've talked about the bipartisan infrastructure law and some of the possibilities that that opens up for us, just in terms of our resources to collaborate and our resources to invest. We also have, as of a couple of months ago, the Inflation Reduction Act. And through this act, America is committed to take the most aggressive action we have ever made to confront the climate crisis and strengthen our energy security in our nation. It positions America to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and to get halfway there within this decade. Very significant. It will save American families on energy costs, it'll create good jobs across the country, it'll increase our energy security, and it will advance environmental justice. We are ready to do this work and ensuring that the investments from this legislation reach the communities that need them the most. One of the major environmental justice program investments is we are going to be setting up, and there's actually an RFA out for this now. They're called Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. My favorite acronym for that is TICTAC. I think it's very catchy. But these Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers will be based in each region. There'll be one in Region 5. And their primary purpose will be to lower the barrier to accessing all of these resources that I just talked about, as well as the other technical assistance and financial assistance resources that EPA has, right? So be keeping an eye out for those centers. They will be there for local government. They will be there for communities, for anyone who has always wanted to do something really big and then looks at the process of applying for a federal grant and goes, maybe I'll find another way to do this. We want to make it possible for those resources to flow to the places where they're needed most and get past those barriers. And we've put a lot of thought. In fact, we have an entire agency equity plan. We've put a lot of thought into how do we actually make sure that all of these resources get to the places where they're meant to be and do the work that they're meant to do. All right, so we'll put those resources in place where people live, work, play, and go to school. And it will include things like there's the DERA program. It replaces diesel trucks, even diesel school buses with zero emission options. There's targeted programs that I can't even begin to touch on that you can use to kind of develop the suite of interventions that you need in your community. All right, so in addition, I want to mention a couple other things that this Inflation Reduction Act does. It will not just be these specific investments, there will also be environmental and climate grants. And this will really let communities lead the way. So we're not going to come up with all the solutions, we're not going to come up with all the programs, but we can create a grant program that'll put resources in the hands of folks who can innovate, who can create, who can come up with those solutions. We will also be supporting work on fence line air monitoring for communities that live near to industrial facilities. That's an important part of the investment. And we will also be investing in zero emission technologies like solar rooftops to propel our clean energy economy forward. All right, so I think I want to stop there. I could keep talking about our programs, but what I really want to emphasize is that I am a resource to you. One of the most important things in my mind that the Environmental Justice Program does, it provides a front door to a very complicated, very large agency. And beyond that, it provides you a way of connecting with other federal agencies. So I encourage you, as you do your work, to not hesitate to reach out to EPA Region 5. And you can absolutely email me. You can reach out to me, and I will share information with my team, and we can work together. I'm incredibly excited about our ability to, at last, put the people power behind this work and to have the resources and staff to work directly with communities and directly with organizations such as yours to create this change. You know, it can feel really overwhelming, can't it? Here we are in 2022. We just got out of a pandemic. There's wars going on. There's this massive climate change going on. We're acutely aware of justice and equity in a way that we may not have been before. We're trying to manage all of this stuff at once. But we can do it. You may not be aware that the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act is this year. So it's a big deal for us. 50 years ago, pollution from industry and wastewater plants had left many of our waterways certainly not swimmable, certainly not fishable. You probably wouldn't even want to be on them on a boat. Cuyahoga River in Cleveland catching fire in 1969, the year after I was born. That fire was a tipping point in a way, though. It forced us as a nation, and it forced our leaders to really grapple with the challenges that we face, to say, is this good enough for us? Is this good enough for our country? And to say no, and to go about fixing what had gone wrong. So the Clean Water Act was passed, and EPA was created, and it was a turning point. I think we transformed our nation's waters. There's a lot of work to go, but we've absolutely transformed our environment, our air and our water and our land in so many ways that were unimaginable 50 years ago. So as we find ourselves in a similar kind of tipping point now where it just feels like it's too much and it's too overwhelming, we do face some daunting challenge, but we also are at an incredibly exciting time where we can not only actually deliver a transformation in our environmental quality, but at the same time, we can create a more just and equitable society. And that is really at the heart of our shared prosperity and our shared thriving as a nation. That having that basic level of equity across our country is really the key to our economic and environmental well-being. because the neglect of equity is what left many of these problems unaddressed for so long. So now that we're ready to make this investment, let's do that hard work together. Thank you for your hard work that you have been doing and will keep doing. Thank you for your dedication. And we will do this together. You know, none of us are in this alone. I'm going to just loop back. Collaborative problem solving. It sounds kind of like a jargony phrase, and it is. We have entire grant programs built around that, entire models built around that. But what it comes down to is the power when we align ourselves together around our true values and we really think meaningful involvement, fair treatment. What does that mean for me, for the people I serve, for the place that I'm in? When we are all connecting to those basic values, we can work together in ways that nobody's ever seen before. We can actually transform the way that federal government serves local communities by drawing our attention to the right places. So I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity to work with you going forward, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you, Alan. I want to thank you panelists for joining us on stage. I'm going to introduce you in the order that I see you. We have Megha Sinha with us here today. Megha is a principal at NBBJ in the urban planning and design field. Natalie Cruz-Daniels from Ohio University heads up their environmental studies program. Of course, he does not need any introduction. President Shannon Hardin from Columbus City Council. Thank you, President Hardin, for joining us. And Alan, thank you again for being here with us this morning. So I'm going to kick this off with our first question, which is, when you think about environmental justice in your line of work, how do you approach this topic? And what can we do better? And Megha, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I have to say that Alan and I did not exchange notes. So, as you hear me speak, it's good to hear the similar things that I'm thinking about and my profession's thinking about. So my line of work entails urban design, urban planning, architecture, landscape architecture. So if you pause and think for a second, it's literally us impacting every second of your life in one way or another. So that's a pretty profound place to be in. And we impact your well-being, right? And you started talking about it, Alan. So the key issues driving our current work, climate change, equity, and community health. And all of that impacts environmental justice. It's that common thread through it all. So the way I personally approach environmental justice is in three kind of buckets: correcting past mistakes, acknowledging and mitigating the harm that we as a profession, land use and development, have let happen. So development decisions such as where we located landfills, or where we put industrial sites, or where we built our highways, those are all things we need to correct. Yeah. There's a future forward piece to it, which is thinking about equitable distribution of the benefits that we can have from land use and development decisions we are making right now. So thinking about who gets access to waterways. You mentioned the Rapid 5 project. Trails and parks, where have we had them? Where are we going to plan for them? And how are we connecting communities to nature? Those are all part of Future Forward. And finally, resiliency planning. We talked about climate change, keeping the most vulnerable populations in mind. People of color, women, children. I'm pointing at my daughter there, not paying attention to me talk. So as we think about action plans for climate, for hazard mitigation, we have to keep these folks top of mind, and it will serve us all well.
Thank you, Megha. And I just want to support your daughter by saying that I focus best while I'm taking notes as well. Thank you for joining us. Natalie.
Thank you so much. I feel like there's a common thread through a lot of what we've heard Alan talk about and Megha. I'm from Ohio University, and we sit in the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service, and so our remit is to serve the state of Ohio and the Appalachian region, and we do that in a variety of sectors, from economic development to health, data analytics, education, and where I sit in the environmental studies, so in energy and the environment. So I want to frame just a couple of places where we can really highlight this work in what we do in that kind of service aspect. And so we lead an online Masters of Sustainability, Security, and Resilience. And so This is an opportunity for us to train early to mid-career professionals to be those leaders for a changing climate. So developing those skill sets to support an organization or community in adapting to climate change. And we all recognize that the impacts of climate change are impacting poor and Black and brown communities the most. And so in our curriculum, we have to center that as part of our training. And so we do that kind of in two main ways, but it's really integrated. And so part of that is awareness, right? Part of that is including case studies and diverse voices in everything that we do, so that we really do center that awareness. But ultimately, awareness isn't enough, and we need to give people the skill sets and the tools to be able to actually do something. And so that may be connecting with appropriate finance. And so that's one of the places where, the new opportunities that Alan presents are really, really key to that. And then also giving them hands-on experience in stakeholder mapping and community engagement, and using the American Society of Adaptation Professionals Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion framework as a central piece of their capstone. So just a few examples of the ways that we really try to incorporate that justice and equity mission into that training so that our graduates can go out and lead their communities. A second effort that I think exemplifies this is a NOAA-funded planning effort where we're working to build a collaborative of local health departments in Central Appalachia to share challenges, but also successes in creating more resilient communities. We're seeing major impacts of climate change in Central Appalachia. We all have those vivid images of flooding in Eastern Kentucky recently, right? And so these are incredibly poor communities that don't have these resources. So by collaborating and by getting resources into these communities, with this focus on health departments who serve the people who don't have a voice, serve the people who are the least served, we specifically center justice in that work and trying to get resources into these under-resourced organizations that serve the most underserved populations. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I really love some of the common threads that are coming out through all of this.
Thank you, Natalie. President Hardin.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and it certainly is an honor to be here for this conversation and to have this focus on environmental justice, and to MORPC, to William and Kirsten, and for bringing us all together so that we are being intentional. I often say that what we build, and for the purposes of this conversation, where we build are physical manifestations of our values. And if that is true, we can look at the need to undesign or redesign the red line, and how we have used particularly zoning and exclusionary zoning tactics to put people or force folks to live and thus intake hazardous environments, I think, in two ways. So as the city right now is undertaking our zoning rewrite, it's the first time in nearly 60 years that our community has taken the time to look at, rewrite, and make sure that we are building an equitable future for our community. If we, on my desk, I keep a 1936 map, redlining map. And I used to say it was for folks coming in to say that, we have to be intentional about being as intentional about what we design for the future as our forefathers were in designing our past. But really it's for me as a policymaker to remind me about being intentional in every aspect of this work. I think back as it pertains to zoning, just the last year, folks in this community may remember there was an explosion at the Yinkin Majestic site on the northeast side of Columbus. And it's a heavily industrial area, but is closely surrounded by a residential community, a middle-class African-American community. And what I have found in the subsequent months is not only now do we have to talk about the impacts of where folks lived and how they got there, but now we have to rebuild trust with folks who have been afraid and have seen and been victims of this type of zoning. And so that's the work of all of us, and I think that that's the work that might make it a little bit more difficult, but that's the work we have signed up for. The second area is, and I think huge opportunity that we have as a community is around Link Us. The ability to use transit and transit-oriented development to make sure that where people live and work and play are along transit corridors that are safe and healthy, that have access to fresh food and healthcare and jobs, is as much about environmental justice as anything that we can do. And that is forward thinking. That is on our plate right now. It's not easy. But as we talk about this in the community and put forward this value add conversation around, going to the public and talking about the necessity of investing, $6 billion plus in creating this future for this entire region, we have to be able to connect these dots back to the environment, the ability for folks to be healthy, the ability for folks to have a safe future. And so I think, again, this conversation is so timely. It is so neat to have everybody together with this intentional focus. Again, if these are our values, they must be seen in our policies as well.
Thank you, President Hardin. I appreciate it. Alan.
Wow, just great points that everyone's making. And President Hardin, to hear how you are working to intentionally change the way that land use is done and reverse that historical legacy, that is exactly what I have in mind. And that's, so I'm really thinking now in that context, what does EPA bring to the table? I think one of the major things that we've focused on, our wheelhouse is risk assessment. Our wheelhouse is in understanding the environmental and human health impacts of different activities. So where we are devoting a lot of investment now is our ability to evaluate disproportionate and cumulative impacts in a very scientific way that's not just quantitative, it's not just reducing everything to a risk number, but it's also taking into account the social determinants of health. What access to health care do folks have? Is there a food desert? What's the housing infrastructure like? How predominant is lead paint? We can look at all of these things. So I see the investment that EPA making now and that we're going to be making in the future will be complementary to the work of local leaders. It's to increase our ability to evaluate disproportionate and cumulative impacts. And we are expecting to have a framework guidance document on that publicly available by September 2023. But before that, what we really want to be doing, what I'm advocating for, is finding partners who already want to do this work and building the way we do this analysis on what will serve local leaders to create change. So for example, working with the city of Chicago, as they're looking at the same question, they're realizing that redlining has baked inequitable land use deeply into how the city is structured, and that has been perpetuated by subsequent decisions, and now they're ready to create a change. Part of that is more air monitoring so they understand the situation on the ground, but part of it is actually undertaking a cumulative impacts analysis. So once that you clearly understand where the impacts are located, what those impacts are, then you make a compelling case. You're no longer speaking just to the heart, you're speaking to the mind. You make a compelling case for why change is needed. So that's where I see EPA going in the future, is being a better, more effective partner in terms of providing the information and the analysis that supports that work. And what we have available now that I would encourage anyone interested in this work to check out is an online tool called EJ Screen. You can use EJ Screen and you can do a quick analysis of any area that you want to and understand the potential for disproportionate impacts in that area compared to the rest of the state, to the EPA region, or to the country as a whole. And that can be a starting point not only for a dialogue about where change is needed, but you live there, you already know where change is needed. It's actually also a tool for convening, talking to EPA, talking to other federal agencies, saying, look, EPA said. And then when you're applying for a grant, look, EPA said. So I encourage all of you to make use of that tool.
Awesome. Thank you. So Tic Tac and EJ Screen.
EJ Screen is real now, and Tic Tacs are coming.
There we go.
Yes.
Everybody remember that. And we're going to take you up on your offer to help Alan. So Megha, what one thing, this is kind of a lightning round here, I think, although we've got a little bit of time, so we can dive a little deeper. What one thing would you tell the audience that they can do today to move the needle on sustainability and equity?
Right. There are a lot of things.
That's just a little small ask. Right. What one thing?
So I think a good place to start really is by including the historically marginalized communities in our planning process and really give them agency for decision making, because it's just not enough to say, well, here, sit down at this meeting with me, but have them help you make the right decisions. They know their communities best. They know what they've gone through, and their lived experience cannot be replaced by no matter how many degrees I bring to the table. So listen, and so it's an easy thing, but it takes time, it takes resources, but there is no shortcut to it. So listen to the communities you are impacting in your work.
Okay, listen, I like that. Natalie.
So I'm going to first echo that that is really the key. And so, coming from an academic standpoint or from an educational standpoint, where I come at this is that we need to have the conversation, right? We need to all recognize it, that everyone in this room kind of knows these issues, but that we need to go further than that, but that we ultimately need to have some concrete ways of actually doing something. And so while we need to make sure that we have the actual community at the table, we have to also bring the resources that community needs and listen to the community about what those resources are. And so a lot of the work that we do is about listening to a community about what they need and what's going to work in their community, and then being the facilitator. So I think that being that connector, being that facilitator is where we kind of land is, not just have the conversation, but truly understand what the community needs in their words, and then facilitate a connection to resources that supports that. And Tic Tacs are a great way of doing that.
I wish I had some Tic Tacs to pass out here on stage. Shannon.
Every time you guys say Tic Tacs, I'm thinking TikTok.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do a TikTok about the Tic Tacs. That's coming later.
I agree.
That's after the fact.
That's right.
Well, I mean, you guys Mega said it best. We have to normalize this conversation in the place and in communities that are being impacted most. They might not have the vernacular to sit here and have this conversation, but they know that they're not by a walking path. They know that their communities are different and separated. They know that their babies have higher rates of asthma, and they can talk about the real life impacts of what they are experiencing, and can vision a future where things can be better. And so we as policymakers, we as folks who have the information and have the slides and have the decks and have the data, it's on us now to connect those dots and make sure that we're able to help them move forward and really shape an environment and a community that fits them better for the future. The one other thing, again, this is from a perspective of a policymaker, we have to be bold. Like the earlier question, we were talking about zoning and zoning reform, and it is really cool and comfortable to have it here in a room where I know folks understand it, but the hardest place to have that conversation is with me is at 6:30 on Mondays when we have our zoning meetings. It is tough. It is tough when when you're trying to build housing for people of color or for low-income communities in mixed income neighborhoods, and talking about density. That is tough for a policymaker, because folks have the history and bring some of that baggage. And so the one thing that we can do is be bold and stand and educate, but still do what we know is right for our community now, and certainly for our community in the future.
Thank you. Be bold.
Wow. I don't think I could say any of this any better than has been said, but I will just echo the point that I think absolutely central is authentic engagement of communities and respectful, authentic engagement. We're not, we're sitting here in Chicago, we're not riding in on a white horse and solving the world's problems. We're here to serve, and we cannot serve without that local leadership that tells us what service is needed. So I think that is absolutely at the heart of it, and then earning trust is so critical to that, because trust has been broken in so many places. You have to earn the trust to hear the authentic voices, and then we're doing what we want to be doing. We're working towards our highest good. We're not just trying to solve the problems that we've left behind. We're solving those problems, but working towards our highest good for all communities. That's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. And this has been such a great conversation. And as I think about what you all are saying, I want to layer on top of it a little bit. What I have noticed in my career is that in order to be bold, in order to listen, in order to collaborate, where we are most effective is when we are pouring resources directly into those communities that have been without resources for generations. And that we're doing it consistently, and that we're building that trust through the resources and through the listening and through putting our best, newest ideas in conjunction with the thoughts that we hear into the communities that have been historically had their backs turned on them. And I want to thank you all for the ways that you have partnered with this entire region, that you have built those partnerships, and thank you for your time this morning. And I think I am now supposed to dismiss us all. Okay, great. So we are going to have a little bit of a break before we go into our breakout sessions, and maybe Brandy's going to tell us a little bit more about that, which will be great. So thank you to our panel.
So now we have a fabulous day planned for you with lots of breakout sessions. If you check your program guide, you can see all the different options. Go ahead and feel free to grab a MORPC staff member if you can't find your breakout room, but there's signage out in the hallway. The next session is at 10 a.m., and then we have another track following that at 11:15. Don't forget to stop by the exhibitors, and we hope that you really enjoyed this program and that you're eager to learn more as you go through your day. And please join us back here in this room at 12:30 for the lunch program for more inspiration. So thank you all.